Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Jason Parisella and welcome again to Jason's in the House. We are glad to have you with us. I'm a real estate agent with Keller Williams Realty right over at the Cumming Center in Beverly. And our guests today are Marc LeBlanc and Larry Green. They are the owners of Servpro of Burlington, Woburn, and then Servpro of Stoneham and Wakefield. Your location is actually in Woburn, correct?
Correct.
Yes. Okay, great. Welcome, Marc and Larry. It's great to have you on the show. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about the company?
Okay, well, first of all, thanks very much for having us today. We're very happy to be here. Servpro is a cleaning and restoration company. We're a nationally franchised company with 1,400 locations nationwide. We've been in business since 1969 as a franchise. We have been located in Woburn for the last 3 years. We are a cleaning and restoration company, but our real emphasis is on disaster recovery from flood, fire, smoke, soot, mold problems, and we look to help both homeowners, business owners, commercial and residential properties to help make problems go away. Aside from those basic functions that we do, we also are carpet cleaners, we do air duct cleaning, we do a lot of work with, particularly with residential homeowners and realtors in deodorization. We also do crime scene cleanup, biohazard types of cleanup, and we're a 24-hour a day, 365-day-a-year operation. And we specialize in emergency service, and our goal is to make whatever loss you've had like it never even happened.
Wow.
And just one quick little thing, I just want to show you a picture. This will take about just a little bit of the type of work we do. If you've ever seen the show Hoarders.
Hold that up, Larry, so we can get that on on the screen there. Okay, so what's this? This is
a home that we did some work in. It was actually nearly a mansion. A woman who lived there, she lived alone. She was a hoarder, as you can see. This was a bedroom that she actually slept in. You can see her diet was composed mostly of Pringles, Cheez-Its, and Pepsi. And this was what it looked like when we went into the home. At the time, we had no idea whether it was a bedroom. We really didn't know what it was. After we were working on this for a few hours, we discovered that what lay beneath this, and this was actually a number of hours later, this is what the room actually looked like when we were done. So this is just a short sample of the type of work that we do, and this type of work that you might see featured on Dirty Jobs, Hoarders, things like that. So
yeah. Now, when you go in and do a job like that, does that include sanitizing and so that it's people know that it's completely safe or bacteria free or anything like that? Is that included in the service?
Yes, it's clean and disinfected in a livable condition.
Okay. So do you also do the rubbish removal, or do you work with another company that does that, or?
We make all the arrangements to remove all the debris, rubbish, and there are different types of disposal requirements that you have to take care of. Biohazard is different than just general trash and things like that. So we accommodate whatever's necessary for the job.
So you guys, obviously, you encompass so many different things having to do with a home. Mm-hmm. One of the things I want to talk about, and we can get into some of the other things too if we have time, is mold. Because as a real estate agent, I'm coming across it quite often. Mm-hmm. It's one of those, I mean, it's been around for a number of years, but it's almost like one of these new hot topics that it becomes, and I feel like there's a lot of unknowns, and people aren't quite sure how to deal with it or what it's all about. So tell us a little bit about mold, what it is. Let's talk about, first of all, what it is.
Simply, it's a fungus. Mold is a form of a fungus, just like a mushroom is a form of a fungus. There's probably hundreds of thousands, not probably, there are hundreds of thousands of species of mold that are around. Some can be very dangerous, some are very beneficial. Penicillin is a mold. Blue cheese dressing that you put in your salad at the restaurant, that's a mold. But by the same time, you also have Stachybotrys, known as black mold or killer mold, which if it's ingested and gets into your respiratory system can be very dangerous, leading to severe respiratory problems up to and including death. So
it's the black mold that's the issue? Is really kind of the...
Not always. To the wrong person, any type of mold can be dangerous. If you have respiratory problems, if you have asthma, if you're just had a surgery and you need to be in a clean environment, mold can be, it's like pollen. Not everyone's allergic to it, but if you are, it can be harmful. And this, like Larry said, there's hundreds of thousands of species of it. You could be allergic to one species and the rest of them could be fine. So it's, to the wrong person, even the good molds can be dangerous.
Right.
And people are allergic to penicillin.
Yeah.
So if you're allergic to penicillin, if you're exposed to penicillium, which is the mold, that could have effects to you.
Now, what's the most common one that you see in a house?
Typically, Aspergillus penicillin. The reason why it's got two names is because under a microscope you can't tell the difference. It's all one in the same. A lot of times it's either that or cladosporium. When you're in an attic and you see mold in an attic on the underside of the sheathing, that's typically the mold that you're going to find.
And now that's the black. Is that the black mold?
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of them are black. They can be, you know, they vary. They go out throughout the rainbow of colors of mold can be.
Yeah.
There is white mold. You see the white powder on the
Yeah.
underside of, typically in basements. I believe that's cladosporium, or black or green. I mean, it
all depends.
It all depends.
Yeah. Interesting. So, I mean, the most common place I think people would kind of something that's common is in a bathroom.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have, you know, you don't wash, you wipe down your tiles, or you have the grouts all moldy, should people be concerned, or I mean, or do you need to? What would you?
Not in a bathroom. You're going to have some form of mold. On non-porous materials like tile, wipe it down, and it's going to be fine.
It gets in the grout most of the time.
The
Then
grouts?
you can't get, yeah.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. You can use, you know, the grout is one of those things that's very porous. I mean, if you seal your grout, make sure you seal it annually.
Right.
Because over time it will get more and more porous, and mold will grow there. It is something that a Mildex or a biocide will take care of, will kill
Yep.
the mold, but I don't know if it'll ever bring its natural color of the grout back,
Right.
which can be a struggle.
Yeah. Okay.
And you know, another thing too is that mold is present everywhere. If you exist on Earth, maybe in Antarctica it may not be, but
Right.
anywhere else pretty much on Earth there's going to be mold. In this room there's mold. It becomes problematic when you're in a confined area or in a home or in a structure of some sort and you get elevated levels. And you get elevated levels generally in situations where you have a water loss. I mean, mold basically thrives on three basic things. One is moisture, another one is a food source, and that food source is generally some sort of a cellulose, porous material, paper, wood. So that's basically, but you know, outside, leaves decomposing,
Yeah.
create mold. You know, there's probably mold in many people's refrigerators. There's mold in wherever
Right,
you
I
go.
mean, you see it everywhere. So I guess the question becomes, how do you know, obviously if you're having health issues, it could be, you find out it could be mold, but how does someone know if they have a problem? I mean, like you said, it's everywhere. Probably every house has mold. So when should you be concerned, or what should you do, or what should you look for?
Typically health issues will, you know, you go to your doctor and they're starting to ask questions about, you know, have you been exposed to mold?
Yeah.
Mold is everywhere. It's all around us every day, 24 hours a day. It's something that grows in our environment. We see it in the springtime with the pollen and with the dandelions. Spores travel the same way. You open your windows and spores are blowing in, spores are blowing out. So it's a matter of when you do have elevated levels, the only true way to know if your air quality in a home is elevated is to have it tested by by a hygienist, an industrial hygienist, and they'll take an air sample of inside your home, they'll take an air sample of outside, and then under a microscope it'll be looked at, and they'll determine what the levels of each mold are, or if there's something outside that isn't, or something inside that isn't outside, then you've got a mold problem.
Right.
You know, and the other thing too is that sometimes it's very obvious that you have a problem, and that's
Yeah,
when
I
you
mean,
see
yeah.
colonization, you see green or blue or
Right.
black spots in areas where you probably, quite often, mold follows after you've had a water loss. If you had a roof leak, if you've had a pipe burst in the house, if you've had a damp cellar, just because the moisture really allows mold to thrive and colonize.
And that's one of the things that I've heard too, where if you don't treat, if you do get water in those situations and you don't get rid of it the proper way, people might think that they put a fan in their basement or a dehumidifier on and they think the water's gone, but a lot of times it isn't, right?
Right.
And that's what causes maybe the hidden mold problems.
Yeah. I mean, quite often folks will, will call us and then they'll say, well, I don't think we really need you. We'll get ready to go out there and they'll call back and say, I don't think, we just went down and wet vacked it up.
Right.
Well, wet vacs don't have that type of vacuum and that power that's going to not only extract the moisture from the carpet, but from the pad beneath it, which acts like a sponge. So
It's like a breeding ground for mold.
Absolutely,
The pads, yeah.
And the other thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that mold is very, very fast growing. It can, 48 to 72 hours, mold begins to colonize. You can see situations more or less like this, if you could zero in on that a little.
So that's a basement wall?
Yes. And the different colors are different types of mold. And what they're doing is they're fighting for, they're using the moisture that's in the room and they're fighting to survive. And they're reproducing and spreading. And when you see mold and there's a defining line between it, that's typically two different types of mold. Without taking a sample of it and testing it, you can't determine what they are. But they're fighting for the moisture.
Right.
They're eating the cellulose materials, and the moisture is their water type. The water is the moisture that they use to breed, and the material on the gypsum or the sheetrock is what they're eating.
So if you get rid of, so in that situation, you come in, all the water's gone. Just say there's never any water for that would eventually would die, right? The mold would not.
It wouldn't die. It would go dormant.
Go dormant.
Yes. I mean,
So there's still a problem when it's dormant? Does it still create a health problem?
It can,
for those
yes.
people that, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It can stay dormant for a very long time. I mean, they opened up tombs and they've had mold in there that stayed dormant. That's
just waiting for some water.
just waiting for water, just hanging out there, waiting for water to be introduced or moisture to be introduced, and they'll stir it right back up.
Yeah, interesting.
So it'll never, without being properly remediated, it'll never be gone.
So the common thing I see, or I've heard, people get water in their basement. So just say all of a sudden you get, your basement's not finished. You get water in your basement, maybe an inch or so. You use your sump pump or your dry vac, concrete walls. Should you be concerned?
With concrete, it will grow on concrete, but it would need to be exposed for a very long period of time before it would grow on concrete. What you need to be concerned with is more sheetrock, wood framing.
So if you have a finished basement, you need to get it dried out properly.
Absolutely.
Right.
If there's carpeting that got wet, if any material that will absorb water has the ability to grow mold.
Okay.
So mold will stick to it and mold will grow on it.
Yeah. Is that the most common? Where do you see it most common? Is in the basement?
Yes. Basements.
I've seen it in the roofs too. I had one house that the whole roof was.
Absolutely. Typically,
And
attics is ventilation. Mold grew up in an attic because it wasn't properly vented.
Eventually, all the moisture is going to go up And if it's not
Yeah.
getting out through the attic, then
In
the other thing
attics-
is that they're insulated with no ventilation in the attic.
Correct.
Because that insulation is going to,
Yeah, just
it's a nice place for mold to grow too, right? Isn't it? Or the paper on the
The
back.
paper on
Yeah,
the back
paper,
of the
yeah.
insulation. The
Yeah.
fiberglass itself won't grow the mold, but the paper on the back is a cellulose material, and
Yeah.
that will grow quickly.
And, there's a number of reasons that it happens in attics a great deal. And that seems to be where home inspectors, if you're in the middle of a real estate transaction,
Right.
the home inspector comes in. Typically, it seems that that's where we're finding that they're identifying a mold problem more than any other places. And
Yeah.
that's because it gets very hot up there, very warm, which is the other third thing that I forgot to mention before that mold needs is most molds require a
There's some
lot of heat.
Yeah.
Heat, moisture, and food. Ventilation is not always so great. A lot of times people will spread the insulation, they'll cover the soffit vents, they'll cover, some of the ventilation features of the roof line. You get roof leaks, and the other issue is that a lot of times if you have a bathroom vent that takes moisture out of the bathroom, which is a good thing, a lot of people just vent it up into the attic, let
and
it go,
yeah.
and it's
It needs to be
like,
vented right outside.
right,
Yeah.
right. So we've seen a number of cases where,
Now, you're showing us some pictures that, I would imagine, that obviously it's mold. However, bringing up a home inspection, which is usually where I see,
sure.
you'll see mold. And then there's always the question whereby, and you can answer this too, do you provide that service, where a company could come in and say, yeah, yes, it looks like mold. But the question is it really mold? Because that's, I forget what you called it, it's a person that is
An industrial hygienist.
industrial hygienist, because the only person that can tell you that it's actually mold. So how do you handle that?
We will go out and inspect any home. If we get a call from a homeowner, a realtor, whomever, we'll go out and look at it. If we can make that determination, just from our experience and our training, to determine that it's mold and save the expense of an industrial
Right, 'cause
hygienist
that's another
or an
cost.
indoor air
Yeah.
quality expert, we will make that determination. If it's something that is gray that we can't answer, we will inform the homeowner that we recommend a hygienist doing doing a test in there
Right.
to determine what type of mold it is.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, no, when we, if we were to see a situation like the picture that we were just showing a second
Right,
ago,
right.
we wouldn't need an industrial hygienist for that.
Right.
But a lot of times what you have is a situation where there may be a lot of settled spores that have not yet colonized in an area.
Yeah.
That's invisible to the eye. The spores are what, 0.3
It's-
micron or?
A mold spore, we've been talking about mold spores. A mold spore is 1/16 of a human hair. That's
Wow.
how small one spore is.
Yeah.
So if you have one spore, you're not going to see it. There are three categories of mold. Category one is normal fungal ecology. We're in normal fungal ecology.
Right.
That's, you have mold around us, it's not visible, it's all around us.
Yeah.
You have condition two, which is settled spores. Again, we can't see it. And condition three is visible mold. And condition three are the photographs that Larry showed, or things that you've seen in attics is condition three. The rooms adjacent to those are typically category two, because air flows throughout a home. So if you go up in your attic and there's mold in your attic and you have a pull-down staircase, when you're coming down those stairs, you're drawing air with you.
Yeah.
Spores are coming with you. So that room, if it's in a hallway, if it's in a bedroom, wherever that staircase is that room that it goes into is probably a category 2 room. There's settled spores in that room. It's
So if you just never went up in your attic and just stayed in your attic, and there was and it didn't come down to where you're sleeping or where you're living, you wouldn't have an issue.
probably not.
But eventually, you're saying it's going to, or if you start poking at it and everything like that, it's going to eventually filter down into you breathing it.
Well, air movement, and once you break the containment, the pull-down staircase, for the most part, provides you with a fair amount of, you're not settling it, you're not creating any movement. But if you go up there, if you're going up there rummaging through some old things
then all
that
of a
you
sudden,
have,
yeah.
or, trying to check, you got critters up there or something like that,
Yeah. So actually, how do you get rid of it? What's the process on that?
On porous materials like sheetrock or plaster or blue board, depending on what you want to call it, the only way per our guidelines is we need to remove it. We need to remove the sheetrock 2 feet beyond visible growth. So we would have to go in every direction, up, down, left or right, 2 feet beyond visible growth, physically cut out the sheetrock, put it in a 6 mil bag, tape up that bag, wipe that bag with a biocide that's going to kill it, and walk that bag outside the house. Typically we have containment set up, either localized just on the area. If it's a small enough amount of mold, we can just have a set containment right for that little area. If it's a big area like an attic, we'd have to contain like the staircase or the access in there and run it under negative pressure using an air scrubber to draw the mold and to draw the air to create a negative chamber.
So it doesn't get all
So
over the house.
Right.
Yeah.
we don't cross-contaminate. Our number one concern is the safety of our employees and safety of the occupants of the home. We need to make sure that they're wearing the necessary protection, and we're going to make sure that we're not going to cross-contaminate an entire home.
Right.
Our guys wear respirators.
So there's a
Such
respirator.
as?
This is a typical respirator.
So that's what they'll.
Tyvek suits are also worn with that. We wear gloves when we tape up the gloves to so no spores get in there. We have the containment area, and we have a breakdown room next to it that we get out of our personal protection, and then we have a clean room, so we're not cross-contaminating a house.
And once you put it in the bag, where does it go from there?
It goes into a dumpster and goes into a landfill.
Is it a
with everyone
special?
else's
trash. Can it go to any landfill?
Yes.
Once
It's not, at that point, it's not considered a biohazard.
It's out in the air, and
Right.
yeah.
It's not confined, so if it
Like-
colonizes, it's just joining the other 10 million mold spores that are
Right.
everywhere we go.
Now, for an asbestos, that has to go to a
That's
special
it.
place, right?
Yeah,
Because that's a whole different.
asbestos and lead paint are totally different when it comes to remediating it. Mold at this point in time isn't the only guidelines that are out there. There aren't any federal guidelines. It's not mold.
Well, see, that's the difference. Lead paint and asbestos are more
They're heavily regulated.
Heavily
heavily
regulated.
regulated, yes.
At this time, it will eventually, but right now, mold is not regulated. We're certified mold remediators. We're a certified mold remediation firm, but our certification is through the IICRC, which is the Institute of Inspecting, Cleaning, and Remediation. And the only standard there are a couple of different standards out there. EPA has a very good website on mold, the EPA.gov, and also the IICRC has a guideline which is pretty much our Bible when it comes to mold remediation. It's the S520, and their website is iicrc.com as well.
So that's a private group?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And this book, it's several hundred pages long, but this is kind of the Bible of reputable and certified mold remediation as it stands today.
Until we get some regulation, which
Right.
probably, any idea when that might?
There's, I think, about 8 or 9 states, and I don't know this exact number, but that currently have some sort of mold remediation protocols and regulations. Massachusetts is not one of those.
Right.
It was brought to the legislature a couple of years ago. They put together a task force. They made some recommendations, but it died there.
Yeah, the other thing too is, I had this happen in Topsfield with the roof. They had all kinds of mold in the roof. And in that situation also, am I correct, you have to remove all the sheathing in the roof and the shingles and redo the whole? What do you do when
No.
it's on the sheathing?
Not necessarily. What we typically do is when I'm doing an inspection, or when we do an inspection of a home, we ask some preliminary questions to the homeowner. If it's a new roof, you're not about to strip the shingles and replace the sheathing
Right.
on a fairly new roof. There are the ways to remediate the underside in attics. What we typically use is, in a small amount of mold in an attic, you can physically go up there and hand sand it. But you're not going to do that in an entire attic. There are basically 3 ways. You need because it's a growing plant, it has a root. It doesn't go deep into the wood, but it goes a little bit into the wood. And that root needs to be, the hyphae, the root needs to be removed. The way to remove it is to either physically sand it or use a piece of equipment, dry ice blasting or soda blasting, which is soda powder, or sand blasting. We typically steer away from the soda and the sand in an attic because it's quite messy and the cleanup is extensive. Our preferred method in a big attic situation is to dry ice blast it, and the benefit of that is it goes from a solid to a gas without going to a liquid, and we have to use supplied air for our workers because it's oxygen deprived as it starts to break down.
Yeah.
But what we do is we go in there, we have a compressor in the driveway, and the compressor shoots dry ice pellets, rice pellets of dry ice out of a gun at the speed of sound. And what it does is it removes a thin layer of the sheathing. It doesn't hurt the structural integrity of the building, but it does remove a thin layer of the sheathing.
Just takes a layer right off.
Removing the root. And that'll fall down into the bays, and we go back in afterwards and we HEPA vacuum it, and we wipe everything down with a biocide to extra protection. All this is done under negative pressure with air scrubbers running. Our technicians are keeping themselves safe with the PPE, and we're making sure that we're not cross-contaminating the house. When we're done with that, what we do is we bring in a hygienist to test the air. We do not do our own testing.
Well, that was the other thing too, because you could do the job, and the only way to find out if you did a good job or not is to make sure there's no mold in the air. There
are some firms out there that do the remediation and do the testing. We've taken the position that it is a conflict of interest. I mean, to do it both, both. I feel more comfortable with a industrial hygienist coming in there, a third party doing the test and giving us the stamp of approval with their report indicating that we have brought the levels down to a condition 1 normal fungal ecology, and that the threat is gone.
Yep. Okay. We only have a few more minutes left. So what should we, I know there's so much to talk about. You guys, your company deals with so many different issues. Is there something something we can discuss the last couple minutes? I know you brought another piece of equipment. I'm not sure if we can get that on.
That's just it's an air scrubber that we use in a mold, but because it's green, it won't show up in.
Okay, what does Larry have here?
The other tool that we use for mold and for water, this is an infrared camera. What this does is tell us the heat on materials, and we use this a lot in the water world as far as determining what's wet and what's not and what's dry. We use this along with moisture meters. We have hygrometers and petimeters, which are they will tell you what materials are wet and how wet the materials are. I mean, all materials have some moisture level. So what we try to do in our water world when we respond to water damage claims is we bring those materials back to normal conditions. But what this tool allows us to do is to go into a room, and before these infrared cameras were around, we'd go into rooms and we'd end up having to cut all the walls 2 feet up, or really cause more damage than we needed to. The benefit of the infrared camera is we can isolate areas of the room that are wet and focus to dry those conditions. So we're not trying to dry an entire room, we're trying to dry one area.
Yeah.
And that's how, and it helps us to determine if it is dry. With the use of the infrared cameras and the moisture meters, that's how we determine how it's dry.
So you have all this is obviously, you're testing it to make sure there's no question everything is dried out and everything.
Absolutely, because if you have a water loss and it's not properly remediated, it will turn into a mold loss.
Good.
And we want to prevent that. We want to dry it up as fast as we can and prevent additional damage.
Right. Very quickly, how do people get a hold of you if they have further questions?
They can, our phone number is 781-939-6990. We do have a website. It's but probably the best way is through email, and they can go to either lgreen@servpro9427.com or M. LeBlanc, it's LEBLANC, at servpro9427.com. And we're glad to consult and help people find their way out of problems.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us again here at Jason's in the House. We want to thank BevCam for all their help, and we certainly hope you enjoyed the show. If you have any questions or comments for me, or you want to actually be a guest on the show in the future, feel free to contact me at my website, which is jasonparisellateam.com. Thank you.